Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session entitled Engaging Coalition, an effective example of multi-tiered alcohol and other drug prevention targeting a high-risk event from Wake Forest University. I'm so sorry that because of the pandemic, I couldn't be with you in person today, but excited to be able to share this information, and I hope you find it helpful. My name is Peter Rives, and I work at Wake Forest University in the Office of Wellbeing. And my role there, I'm the Assistant Director of Wellbeing, is really focused on alcohol and other drug work. Specifically, sort of three tiers of that work. Alcohol and other drug prevention and education is one tier. Working on providing intervention services is a second tier. And then finally, supporting those students on our campus who identify as being in recovery, long-term recovery from addiction. So if at any point you would like to be in contact or ask questions or get more information from me, I am happy to be in communication with any of you. I have two email addresses. They both come to me. One's just a little simpler, rivespe@wfu.edu, and AOD@wfu.edu. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The goals for this session are that you'll understand how coalition building can really support your work in alcohol and other drug prevention efforts on the college campus. We'll talk through and help you think through the current state of any coalition that you may or may not have on your campus and identify steps that you can take to strengthen and expand your coalition or to create one. You'll spend some time towards the end sort of creating an action plan for identifying some targets for future programming and how to recruit partners and support these efforts of building coalition. And then finally, I'm going to provide you with an in-depth look at one of our successful prevention strategies and how it was its reach was expanded through the use of coalition, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. So first, a little bit about Wake Forest University. Obviously, this picture does not show social distancing. This is a picture of our beautiful graduation on our quad, and I'm so sad that's not going to happen this year. But no, we'll get back there one day soon when it's safe. So Wake Forest University is located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It's a private university with about 5,000 undergrads, just shy. We also have many graduate and professional schools, law school, medical school, divinity school, business school. We do have a 3-year residential requirement for our undergraduates. It's a liberal arts focus, but high academic rigor. We have a large percent of our students who are pursuing pre-med, pre-law, business type degrees, just added engineering. And relevant to our conversation about alcohol and other drugs, our campus is 51% Greek. And I like to put that in context that we are the smallest Division I power conference school in the US. And so if you take out our varsity athletes who are not really candidates for Greek membership, it really raises the percentage of Greek participation of non-athlete students to a much higher percentage. And so the pressure and the influence to be a part of the Greek system is pretty high, and they have a lot of leverage in managing the social scene. So a little history of our alcohol and drug coalition. There was a version of this group that has gone all the way back to the mid-1980s. and originally it was called an alcohol task force. And I'm not familiar with whatever the precipitating event was, but usually there's some sort of precipitating event, something goes wrong, and somebody calls together a task force. And I'm sure that's what happened sometime in the 80s. Around 2002, there was an intentional refocus of the group as an alcohol coalition, and it was a charge from the cabinet level, the VP of Student Life, who sent out letters to people across different departments throughout the university, really charging them with participation in this group and sort of creating a charter. I have a star here because I think that that investment of leadership in creating the priorities around something like this is really important for the success. So for those of you who are just getting started or whose coalitions are really struggling, garnering the support of a high-level administrator to really rally the troops can be a powerful momentum builder. So in 2002, when the Alcohol Coalition was sort of formalized, there were 4 subcommittees that were created. And like I said, personal invitations were sent, committee assignments with goals, expectations, and some of the initial goals sort of outlined. Typically, our Alcohol and Drug Coalition has been chaired by whoever's been in the position that I'm currently holding, which has lived in different places and been called different things, but usually there's been somebody who's, sort of steering the ship around alcohol and drug prevention, and that's the person who has chaired this coalition. And I'm not going to pretend that, since the 80s or even since 2002, there's been consistency in our coalition. There hasn't. There's been sort of frequency of meetings, and attendance at meeting has really fluctuated over the years. And I think we're in a really strong place right now. And it's part of why I wanted to share this with you today. So some questions for you, just on your own to reflect as we sort of dive into the subject. How would you describe your alcohol and drug coalition? Do you not have one at all? And so that's why you're here. You're thinking, man, do we need one? And what should it look like? Do you have a coalition, but it's ineffective? Do you have a moderately effective coalition, but you see opportunities for growth? Or is your coalition just clicking along and you're hoping just to pick up some extra tidbits? I ask this question just so you sort of have it framed in your mind as we move forward, what you're trying to glean from this presentation. So our current alcohol and drug coalition structure is sort of as follows. So our full coalition meets monthly for an hour. And then, as I alluded to, there are 4 subcommittees that make up the full coalition, and those each meet an additional meeting once a month. So those 4 subcommittees right now are assessment and evaluation, prevention and education, policy and practice, faculty, staff, and community outreach. And that is working pretty well for us. So that's been the structure of our coalition subcommittees for more than 5 years now. Our coalition meetings, the full meetings that happen monthly, follow a report out format with some unstructured time towards the end for discussion and questions and people to raise sort of organic subjects or expound on topics that we've covered during the meeting. The chair of the coalition, who currently would be me, meets with each subcommittee at least one time a semester to make sure that they're aimed in a way that is helpful and supportive of the work. So they're not just sort of out there on their own. And then we have a newly chartered, almost sort of like a 5th subcommittee. Student government partnered with us to charter a student alcohol and drug committee. these students who make up this committee have representatives that serve on the Greater Alcohol Coalition, and they really serve as a sounding board for us. They're there to ask questions, to bring information back to student government, but it's really helpful to get that student input. And I encourage you to make sure that you have student voice on your coalition. So in terms of membership, there's me, I'm the Assistant Director of Wellbeing. We currently have 39 members who represent faculty, students, staff, and 19 different campus departments. So some of those academic departments, some of those campus life, other administrative level departments are representative, but you can see this is an extremely representative coalition. And that's, I think, a really important component. And then I would encourage you to consider your representation needs with regard to your sort of town and gown relationship. So Wake Forest is a fairly insular campus. Much of what happens at Wake Forest happens within the confines of our campus. We even have gates that sort of define the outer rim of our campus. There are house parties that are part of the social scene, but there's not sort of a row of bars right across the street from campus as there are in some other communities. So if your campus is one where the campus and the town are one and the same, and there's a lot of interaction, then you're going to want to populate your coalition with representatives from that community. So what works for us? The subcommittee structure really allows for work to happen outside of coalition meetings. Like I said, we follow sort of a report out format, and our subcommittees are out there doing the work in the month between coalition meetings. And because it's a report out, we start each meeting with report outs from the subcommittees. It creates an expectation of progress from the subcommittees from month to month. So they are out there doing their work, and then they know when they come to our monthly meetings that the expectation will be that they're going to report out their progress. Our broad and multidisciplinary representation allows for a couple things. One is valuable diversity and perspective. So we're able to have rich discussion, glean feedback and reactions, cultivate strategies, and identify resources from all across campus. So issues of discipline are considered from a dean of students perspective, from a police perspective, residence life and housing, academic perspective. It's really helpful. And then, as I said, we also have student voice and student perspective. The other purpose for the multidisciplinary representation is that, from my perspective, the Alcohol Coalition is not just a working body, it is also sort of a cultivating ground for ambassadors who can go out and spread information, spread accurate information to all corners of the campus. So really, we're training our membership to be ambassadors to help provide information to the campus community with regard to alcohol and other drug information and initiatives, so that the campus is better informed and so that this issue stays salient. And this really serves to extend the reach of my role. I have a very limited staff. It's me and a part-time clinician, and occasionally I have some grad student help, but that's really it. But these focused subcommittee projects mean that other people are able to spend time, energy, and work on alcohol and other drug initiatives. And it also provides me a place to go when I need help for larger alcohol and drug initiatives, to tap into more staff power. So an example of that would be our alcohol and cannabis screening days. Those for us are 10-hour live events where we do screenings using tablets and give away swag in exchange and do education on site. We typically screen somewhere between 500 and 700 students a day on those in those events, and I need to staff that 10-hour shift with volunteers. Similarly, our sober tailgates, we have staff volunteers that show up and do that work. And the first place I turn for additional staffing is our AOD coalition. And then another added benefit is that our coalition voice provides legitimacy on contentious issues. So when we have issues of policy or practice on campus where there's some other entity within the larger campus community that is doing something that we believe is creating harm with regard to alcohol and other drug outcomes, then we can address that as a coalition, drafting a letter from the Alcohol and Other Drug Coalition with, you know, the support of 39 individuals from 19 different campus departments. Makes it much more powerful than just the assistant director of well-being saying, I'm not sure what you're doing is working. And then finally, if you feed them, they will come. So we have a set meeting time. Everybody knows that until, you know, I don't know what would change it, but third Thursdays at noon is when we meet. And so everybody has that on their calendar. It's scheduled for years and years in advance. And so we get people showing up. There's not much conflict there. And then we serve food. So, you know, it's not a huge budget. A lot of times it's pizza, sometimes it's sandwiches, sometimes it's a salad bar, but serving food helps to make people show up and helps to make people like your meeting more. So just food for thought, pun intended. Okay, so we've talked a lot about coalition, what makes, from our perspective, an effective coalition, why a coalition is worth the effort. And now I want to sort of demonstrate its efficacy by sharing with you one of our big initiatives and how this grew so far beyond our office by way of leveraging our coalition. So Senior Fifth, I hope you don't know what Senior Fifth is, but if you do, I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know what Senior Fifth is, it's this incredibly dangerous activity where some of our upper class students, specifically seniors, try to drink an entire fifth or 750 milliliters of liquor the day of the last home football game before kickoff. So many of them will wake up at midnight and start drinking, and the goal is to finish your fifth and make it to the football game. The student tailgate is sort of the finish line, I guess, without dying. For those of you who haven't done the math before, 100 proof fifth contains about 25 and a half shots or servings of alcohol, whereas an 80 proof fifth contains 17 shots of alcohol, but that's a lot. So Senior Fifth has its own hashtag. You've got to be kidding me. That's the dumbest thing ever. Yeah, I know. When I came to Wake Forest, I could not believe that this was part of what I had to figure out. So when I interviewed at Wake Forest in the winter of 2015, they were very, very clear that one of my biggest and primary tasks was getting this thing under control. And that was back in 2015. I started in 2016, but that year in 2015, 27 students were treated medically for intoxication, so alcohol poisoning. on the day of senior fifth, and 10 of them required inpatient hospitalization because of their alcohol poisoning and their incredibly elevated BACs. So our prevention programming started, like a lot of prevention programming, with a poster campaign. So this is a glimpse at some of our posters, and we launched this poster campaign 4 weeks prior to the actual event. Remember, this is there's a set date for it because it's the last football game of the year, so it's almost always in November. We used a concept, a theme: mindless drinking leads to backwards thinking. So that's our tagline, and we use the backwards writing to represent backwards thinking. So "Are you doing senior fifth" is written backwards, because doing senior fifth is backwards thinking, okay? And the backwards thinking sort of draws people in. They see this backwards thinking, they're like, what, why is that writing backwards? You know, it creates sort of a curiosity and a draw, brings people to the poster. And then, you know, I got pushback from both students and administrators that when I put these posters up 4 weeks in advance, that, you know, I was causing the problem. You know, I had students telling me, "Your office is so dumb. I wasn't even thinking about this until I saw those posters." And, you know, I hear that, but the goal of the campaign was to create discussion, not suppress it. And what I said to those students was, you know, I just got here. I've been at the university for less than a year now, and my understanding is this has been going on for 10 years or more. And so my posters didn't create this. This is something that was already happening. What we are trying to do is cultivate and explore people's ambivalence around this. So yeah, just a point. I think we do need to be careful about advertising and norming to the extreme, but this was something that was already happening and happening with regularity and with pretty serious outcomes. So and again, this campaign was really targeting the ambivalence. So obviously there's a subset of our students that we're never going to do this. So this poster campaign is not for them. Maybe it is in that it sort of undergirds their resolve to not participate in something like this and validates their decision making, but you know, it's not aimed at them. Similarly, we have a subset of students that, you know, they were born for this, like their, you know, older brother or their, you know, sorority or sisters have built it up so much that there is no way that they are not doing senior fifth. And that's just real. There are some people that we're not going to sway on this. But I would argue that there's a pretty big chunk of our students that are somewhere on the normal curve who, in the center, that feel like, okay, I know this is a thing. I feel some pressure to do it. And I have some concerns about it. And so those are the students, the ones that are on the fence, the ones who are experiencing ambivalence, are really sort of targeting. So we're raising the question, are you going to do it? It's a question. And then we provide them some answers. And the goal is to sort of give them talking points and perspectives on why this might not be a good idea. So we have very varied messaging strategies. Nostalgia. So, you know, we've got the upper left-hand corner. Since this is the last football game, you don't want to miss it. Similarly with the Deacon statue that's outside of our football stadium. Then fear of negative outcomes, which include sort of the hospital gurney, because hospitalization is a reality, and they do understand that this is extremely risky. Sort of the graduation thing, because these are seniors who, you know, may be heading to law school or medical school or a job, and could a serious conduct issue disrupt some of that. And then finally, the one that says, no, why? To say I survived it, you do know what the opposite of survived is, right? So just sort of reminding people that this sort of dangerous activity can lead to death. And we know that risk evaluation is an area of deficit for people at this developmental stage. The typical college student age, their frontal lobes are not fully developed, and so how effective will that be? It's tough to say. So, and then the final, the lower left-hand corner there with the young kids drinking, there's this really interesting body of research called Self-Perception of Adulthood. Rinker et al. 2015 is a good article to take a look at. But since that has come out, there's been, so basically Self-Perception of Adulthood is this work that measures how adult does someone feel. And then research is showing that the higher someone's self-perception of adulthood, in other words, the older they feel, the less, the less likely they are to participate in high-risk behaviors, such as, binge drinking. And so one suggestion from the Academy is that you can leverage the sense of adulthood as a prevention strategy. So if you remind people that they are older, that maybe they're less likely to participate in something that is high risk, like binge drinking. So this one, targeted at our seniors, suggests that binge drinking, gamifying binge drinking in this way is really immature. So you got these young looking guys here, and it says, no, this isn't high school, grow up. Throughout all of this, you see that we're really leaning into authentic messaging. We're not sugarcoating it. It's not your typical sort of administrative language. Rarely do you see stuff coming from the administration that says grow up, but we wanted to communicate in a language that students understand, and in ways that would, again, sort of cultivate conversation. And importantly, similar to the makeup of our coalition, these posters were student informed. So we workshopped the development of these. We sort of worked through it with them, used student focus groups as sounding boards, and that's really important in all the work that we do. Senior Fifth is, as many high-risk drinking activities are, highly influenced by our Greek population. Like I said, we have an incredibly concentrated Greek system and influence from our Greek system. And so we did want to create messaging specifically for our Greek organizations. However, we didn't want them to feel targeted in a public way, because we were worried about the blowback. We wanted to recruit them as partners in this and not alienate our Greek group. So here are two of our targeted Greek posters. And these actually, the one it's not fair to make my brothers and sisters take care of me. So our Greek organizations do actually make assignments of the newer recruits, usually sophomores, to sort of be the designated caretaker of a senior who's participating. Sometimes that even involves literally having them on a leash. But you're required to, basically be responsible for that person's safety and well-being for the day. And obviously when somebody's drinking, 17 shots in a short period of time, they're usually very sick, fairly belligerent before that, and it's a tough assignment. It's usually a pretty miserable day for those younger people. So the one poster sort of reminds them of that, that this is not kind to your younger brothers and sisters. It ruins their night. And then the one on the right, all of our Greek organizations are required to participate in several different trainings around alcohol and other drugs, alcohol skills training program, TIPS, which is about server liability and organizational liability. And so this one sort of invokes that just reminding them about, this is an extremely dangerous thing, and the chapter could be liable. They could even be personally liable, but really sort of invoking their commitment to their organization and motivating them by protecting their organization. So in order to not target Greek organizations publicly, what we do is we have a meeting with the leadership of all the Greek organizations, men and women, and we distribute these posters in that meeting with their leadership and ask that they put them up themselves in their houses and housing blocks, in their lounges and their social lounges, so that their membership see them, that they discuss them with them, but they're not sort of out there on the outdoor public posting boards. And so I blanketed the campus with these posters, and they got a lot of reactions, and people were seeing them, they were commenting on them, they were discussing them, but then something beautiful happened. So there's a model, and you're probably familiar, it's used a lot in our work and sort of to evaluate and inform our work, but the health belief model, where you seek to increase the likelihood of engaging in pro-health, pro-social, health-promoting behavior by sort of building on these blocks in the middle. So perceived benefits, perceived barriers, the perceived threat and moderating variables there are seriousness and susceptibility, sort of building self-efficacy and internal locus of control, all of which we've sought to do through the messaging of our posters. And then finally, cues to action. And that cues to action piece is one function that the posters served, not just to individuals, to cue them to consider what they're going to do, but also to partners, and specifically the membership of the Alcohol Coalition. Oh yeah, this event is coming up. We need to do something about it. Now I remember, this is that thing that was really important. And I say it's something beautiful because, it could have been the reaction of the campus that, this is just Peter's problem. But it wasn't. And we used our Alcohol Coalition meetings to leverage this. So even before the posters went up, I was keeping the coalition informed of the development of these things, the intention to do so, sharing the materials with them, even recruiting our coalition membership to physically hang the posters up. So they really had some ownership, and there was really nowhere on campus you could go without seeing these cues in the form of posters. And so additional pieces of the puzzle started coming to fruition. So we attempted to build in additional efforts to support the work at the community level with in the form of our posters that would really do work at all levels of the socio-ecological model. And I'm sure you're familiar with this, but sort of social ecological model is a stepped model that reminds us that there are multiple levels at which we can impact, educate, provide programming and services. So there's the individual level, the interpersonal level, institutional, community, and policy. And different versions of the social ecological model will have different names for these, but that's basically the concept there. So some of these initiatives that then developed subsequently were communications. We had blog posts, emails, letters that went to parents, encouraging them to leverage their influence, to off-campus students, because many of our students, again, 3-year residency requirement, many of our students are living off campus, and so may not be around to see the posters as much, and those seniors were really our target population. Residence advisors, graduate hall directors, on their role and their influence in both sort of the prevention and education work, but also safety, providing a safety net role on the night of, increasing their staffing, being aware, having a game plan. I mentioned TIPS, training intervention procedures. So all TIPS trainees, which includes a lot of our Greek leadership, were sent a letter reminding them of how to use their training in response to and preparation for this event. Messaging out to faculty to know this is coming, and to use their leverage to educate in the classroom, but also use some environmental strategies, such as making big papers and exams due immediately following this event, and so that people have an incentive not to get so sick that they can't follow through on their academic requirements. Messaging to Greek organization members, and then the Alcohol Coalition also created a template for faculty and staff to reach out individually and personally to student leaders all across campus and say things like, we know this thing is coming up. I look to you as a student leader and know that you're not going to participate, and I hope that you'll use your influence to help your friends and your peers know that this is something dangerous, and we hope that that'll help them not participate. And most of all, be sure you take care of yourself and others on that night and call for help if you need it, that sort of messaging. I mentioned this meeting with Greek organization chapter presidents and their advisors, where we distributed the posters and gave them information. Really sort of part of that meeting is breaking out into small groups and having them workshop different strategies and efforts they could undertake with their membership to mitigate risk and to discourage participation. And so they developed some ownership. Then the Student Government Association came along. Many of them were represented on the coalition. They wanted to help us. And so we had prevention messaging. We had posters to sort of begin the discussion about should I or shouldn't I. Student government wanted to do something that was more targeted at the safety component. And so they developed a poster campaign, you see here on the screen, really more about mitigating risk. And these went up in the day, 24 hours before the event started, so that students had that information about medical amnesty, about calling for help, about pacing and spacing, about staying hydrated on the actual day of, if they decided to participate. North Carolina is an ABC store state, so all of our hard liquor is sold at state-controlled, state-licensed stores. We call them the ABC stores, and we were able to reach out to our ABC board and get approval to collaboratively draft a flyer that went into the bags of everybody who bought a fifth or more in the 2 weeks leading up to this event who looked to be under the age of 30. This is huge. So everybody, including some of my colleagues, would go to the liquor store, buy some alcohol, and they get a flyer about the dangers of consuming this much alcohol in a short period of time. And the language was vague. It didn't say Wake Forest University students do this stupid thing. It was this time of year, some people undertake a dangerous, so it was vague. And so members of the community that weren't familiar weren't then being sort of sensitized to this dangerous tradition that Wake Forest students were undertaking. Also, effort of membership of the coalition, we started providing food and water at the student tailgate, which again was sort of serves as the finish line, and so can end up being sort of a field hospital for the students who are participating. So cases of water, food available at the event when people get there, and then in fact we had a local restaurant set up and fried chicken fingers with bags of chips and drinks and stuff like that. Then halfway through the event, through the tailgate, we provide pizza at all of the different student organization tents within the student tailgate area. Again, cases of water available, just to try and mitigate some of the risk for those who have decided to participate. We initiated a sober tailgate, celebrating our recovery community. And the first time that we did this, we had over 40 attendees at that. And it actually has resulted in our applying for a grant. We got an NCAA Choices grant. Part of that grant has now supported 2 full seasons of sober tailgates, which are now averaging about 200 people in attendance. So that was a really cool thing, and we placed that sober tailgate right outside of the entrance to the wet tailgate, the student tailgate. Just sort of raised the visibility of the students who choose not to drink or who identify as being in long-term recovery. We created a pre-event emergency response and staffing planning meeting, which included sort of the emergency planning team, local police, local EMTs and hospital representatives, our on-campus EMTs, on-campus police, residence life and housing, dean of students, student organizations, well-being, student health, all and athletics, all working together to identify, who's going to be in place, what do we need to do. It has been the practice of the university to actually staff a mobile field hospital there. So the local hospital has a sort of an emergency room on wheels that they park outside the event. but there's a lot more staffing than just that. And so we met to really be intentional about who's going to be where, who's going to do what, what are we going to do, and planning for all contingencies. And then, you know, the danger doesn't end. The danger doesn't start with the tailgate, and it doesn't end after the game. So enhanced community policing. We actually employed off-campus, off-duty police to patrol the off-campus neighborhoods, just to make sure that we had first responders in place if students at off-campus residences needed help, or large events sprung up as a result of the sort of risky event. So these are just some of the additional efforts, sort of again addressing those levels of the socio-ecological model, and we've now been doing this work around senior fifth for 4 years. We got baseline data in 2015. 2016, we started this with the poster events and these sort of organic developments. 17, 18, and 19 have now come and gone, and we're able to continue to grow our efforts and interventions and map those onto the ecological model. And so in our most recent effort around prevention for this dangerous event, this is what our map currently looks like. So this is Senior Fifth 2019. You can see all of these efforts, some that I've discussed, some I haven't specifically called out yet, but you see this massive list of efforts all happening to prevent harm or promote safety during this one event. And very little of this could have happened if the effort was reliant solely on me and the staff immediately adjacent to my role within the Office of Wellbeing. The Alcohol and Other Drug Coalition was critical in leveraging the support and the person power to make these things happen. We actually, you know, revised the alcohol and drug policy to make it to make Senior Fifth safer. We added a medical amnesty policy. We subsequently added an organizational medical amnesty policy and educated on those things. I've mentioned some of our sequence trainings for individual students, for organization members. The prevention poster campaign was sort of the start point for all of this. The Greek organization specific posters, mentioned the meeting with Greek org presidents, the newsletters and blog posts, communications to student leaders, to Res Life staff, the Student Government Association poster campaign, the ABC store flyers, the pre-event emergency meeting, communication to TIPS trainees, Greek members, faculty communication, enhanced community policing, sober tailgate. We identified that our shuttle bus going to the event itself, the tailgate, was a potential place where we could identify at-risk students upstream and even prevent additional beverages from coming to the tailgates. So we positioned security and EMTs there. I mentioned the food and water provided at the tailgate, which has even been expanded in recent years. We worked with concessions and athletics to get concession stands within the football game to take food swipe dollars and other money we call Deacon dollars, so students could continue to feed themselves and hydrate. Obviously, they can't buy alcohol with that. In the third quarter of the game, we distributed more food, Chick-fil-A sandwiches. Again, fats and proteins are helpful in managing that dangerous BAC. And then another part of our NCAA Choices grant is we created a swag program where we distribute goodies in the fourth quarter and cool stuff like, really cool sweatshirts, hats. We gave away an Apple Watch at one point to incentivize students to stay in the football game. The football game is a place where they have less access to alcohol. If they're leaving the football game, they're going to another party to finish the alcohol that they didn't finish during the tailgate. So keeping them at the game is a prevention effort. So you just see this massive array of efforts that bubbled up organically. And I would argue it all started with that poster campaign and enlisting the support, participation, and knowledge of our AOD coalition in doing that. So this is just a list of some of the groups that participated in some of that work around Senior Fifth. Our local police department, on-campus police department, local EMS, our on-campus EMS, student health service, our peer educators, dean of students, Res Life, our food service people, the coalition, student government, our recovery community, the ABC board, athletics, resident student association, Greek council, emergency services, family engagement, well-being, dean of college, Rhino security, school business, the library, Benson Center, which is our student center, Spectra. These are all groups that were mobilized as a result of engaging our coalition. So we gave it a shot. We put forth our best effort. We crossed our fingers. So let's take a look at what happened. So again, in 2015, you see that we had 25 students who were experiencing alcohol poisoning and required medical treatment for their intoxication. And then 10 of those subsequently needed to go to the hospital for that. The first year that we implemented this program, that 25 dropped to 7, and that 10 was cut in half to 5. The next year in 2017, the 7 dropped to 5, and we only had 1 person that needed to go to the emergency room and be hospitalized as a result of their BAC. Now, it was really nice for us quantitatively because we were able to compare apples to apples because all of these games happened at 7 p.m. And I say that for 2 reasons, actually. Number one, 7 p.m. means that you're a game worth watching. And for us at Wake Forest, that hasn't always been the case. So it was nice to have our football team successful enough to have our games be deemed worth watching for those folks that schedule games. But also, one major variable in computing blood alcohol content is time. So how quickly are you consuming this thing? And this terrible tradition starts every year at midnight, and it finishes at kickoff. So if you have an early kickoff, the risk level goes up. A later kickoff, and 7 p.m. is as late as it can get, means they have more time to finish the same amount of alcohol. So it's still incredibly risky, but risk is mitigated a little bit. And I mention this because in 2018, we had a bit of a wrinkle in that we didn't have a great second half of the year football wise. And so our game was scheduled for noon. So went back to the coalition, student government stepped up again and co-created additional messaging around the added risk of this reduction in time. So students now had 7 hours less to consume the same amount of alcohol. And so you see this poster that says, hey, it's always a bad idea, but now it's even more dangerous. You have the same weight, you have the same sex, you have the same amount of alcohol in a fifth, but now you have 7 hours less, and sort of helping students calculate that. And so in all of our messaging, all of our meetings, all of our discussions with students and student groups, this was sort of highlighted. And it was really clear that students were getting it and discussing it, and that what did play a factor in people deciding whether or not they were going to participate. So in 2018, we did have a bit of a spike in negative outcomes, and we expected it. And I gotta say, from my perspective, it could have been much, much worse. So you see in 2015, we had those 25 that required medical treatment. We did get it down to 5 by 2017, and we were back up to 10, but that 10 is still a lot less than 25. So then let's look at hospitalizations. We started out at 10 hospitalizations in one day for this event. We got it down to 1. We bumped back up to 3, but still even better than our 2016 numbers, despite having 7 hours less. And so to me, that points to maybe some progress culturally in how this tradition is happening and how it's being perceived by our students. And then this past year, we were back at 7 p.m. and back on track with regard to our progress. In fact, I can't imagine a better year. This outcome where we had 1 student on a Saturday night who required treatment for intoxication and 0 going to the hospital is actually better than a typical weekend night any other time of the year. So this is the first time in history that anyone at our university can remember that a senior fifth resulted in 0 hospitalizations. And again, we tend to have more risk than that on a typical weekend night when we're in session. So just really blown away with the outcomes that we've been able to glean from these efforts. So after the event happens, the work is not done. One thing that's really important is we create and distribute a summary report emphasizing a collaborative effort to all partners and stakeholders each year. So obviously, senior fifth is not something that we are proud of, but what we are proud of is how everybody steps up, and we're proud of the progress that we're making. And so we want to support that and incentivize people's continued participation in that. So we send this report out to help people understand that, yes, your contribution made a difference. Our division hosts an internal assessment fair each year at the end of the semester, at the beginning of this summer. And so this is a great place for us to showcase our efforts. And so this was one of the efforts that we showcased in the assessment fair. And there's a picture of our research poster that we created for that event. And then we sort of examine, are there signs of cultural progress? We see the quantitative risk reduction, but are there signs of cultural progress that we're making a dent with student attitudes? So anecdotal student report, talking with students, again, always a great strategy, is that, excuse me, there's much less of an expectation among students to participate in this thing. It's not as big a deal. It's not as much of an inevitability in the student ethos as it once was. We have a school newspaper, and totally organically, not prompted by our office or any other office, in the 2 weeks leading up to the event last year and this year, there are multiple student-written articles in our newspaper. OGB stands for Old, Gold, and Black, that just talk to their fellow students about how dumb it was and how they hoped they wouldn't participate. And we never would have seen something like that 5 years ago. And then this year, extra feather in our cap is we have a student-run parody social media account. I liken it to The Onion, for those of you who aren't familiar, but it's called Fake Warist. Some of their stuff is pretty raw, and it's usually not very kind to administrators, but they joined in the fight. So here you see they've doctored up one of my posters and they posted a series of these things, but this is my favorite. Are you doing senior fifth? No. Why? Because Uber doesn't have ambulances yet. So, you know, I love it. And you see in the comments that someone picked up on that, and this got 847 likes. So it's incredible. Even the snarky, sarcastic students who run Fake Warist are jumping in the fight and sort of verbalizing the idiocy of participation. So love it. So let's turn to you. We've sort of gone through all of this, and you see hopefully how critical coalition is for me in my work, and how I leverage it to really extend the work of our office and get bang for our buck. So how can we make your coalition even more effective? So here are some questions for you. If you want to just get out of a piece of paper, take a picture of the screen, whatever, so that you can sort of work through some of this on your own. Hopefully these are helpful prompts for you. So the first question is, what is one step, you know, taking a bite at a time, that you can take when you return to your home institution to strengthen your AOD coalition? Is it bringing on new groups? Are there people that aren't represented? Is there, or do you want to grab onto this idea of a subcommittee structure? Do you want to do the report out thing where they show up to a meeting and they know you're going to ask them for a report out from their subcommittee, and there's some public pressure to something to report? Second question, who is one ally that you can enlist in supporting this effort? There are a lot of people on campus for whom alcohol problems are a problem. And so who can be your partner in this? Who can really bang the drum? Is there someone in leadership, a VP level person, a provost, a president, a chancellor who's really invested in this stuff? Police chief, you know, dean. Find somebody that can be your partner in this, with whom you can sort of sit down and have some thought partnership. What are some partner offices, departments, and groups? And remember how critical student groups are to some of our efforts, who can be contacted to join your coalition and making it more representative, and provide you access to more helpful resources. And then finally, what are some issues on campus that your coalition can focus on as a collaborative effort? Are there other conference sessions from this conference where you learned about something neat that you want to try out? And is that something that the coalition could do? So that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in to this presentation. I truly hope that this was helpful for you. Again, you know, our coalition has been effective, and you know, it takes a village. It's not this issue of resolving high risk alcohol and drug use on campus is not a one person thing. It's not a one office thing. It's a full campus thing, and that's what coalition can do, is extend it to a full coalition thing. Like I said at the very beginning, if you would like to reach out, I would be happy to exchange information, to hop on a call, to communicate in any way that would be helpful. So again, best way to reach me is directly through one of these email channels. And I will be happy to be in communication. So I hope that you and yours are safe and remain that way. I hope that you learn a lot through this virtual conference. And I hope that we can all get back to some semblance of normal sometime soon. All right, take care. Thanks.